Alright, welcome back. So what we did last time is we just made a simple unit test that it basically just tests that the app pops up and it doesn't create an exception. So what we want to do now is we want to actually make some actual test cases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a simple one. Say you just like to wait for the x-axis here. All we want to do is we want to test that no actual error occurs when we do that. So what we'll do is we'll create another test. We'll just call this test x-axis, and this will take in app test again. And what we'll do for this one is we will want to grab the select box first of all. So the way that we do that is we say select box. That's the variable that we're going to use, and it is so app test. That's our Streamlit instance right now, and we'll say select box. And so remember in main.py how we set keys early on, and I said that this wasn't really, it's not really necessary. Streamlit can make one on its own if it's not specified. Well, another useful reason to have that is in testing you can actually say what the actual key is. So the key is just called x-axis, right? Yes. Awesome. Great. Okay. So that's the select box. So what we want to do is we want to say select box dot set value, so then we can actually set a value in it. And for right now, we'll just set it to wait. And then the .run method, and that'll run the Streamlit application again with that selected. So what we want is we want to make sure that we get no errors from that. So we will do, we're going to use a list comprehension here. So errors is going to be a list of the errors. So if you're not familiar with list comprehension, it's just a way to more easily make a for loop. So we want to do for, we're going to say E in, and this will be, so if you say it's more, it's easier, I guess, if I explain it backwards. So if we say apptest.error, that's going to produce a list of the errors, and those will just be the error widgets in Streamlit. That's not actually the messages that are coming out, which is what we want. So we're looping through that. E is going to be the variable that we're using for that. And then the .value attribute on each of these errors is going to be the actual error messages. So we want to assert that there are no errors, right? So we'll say assert not errors. So with the assert keyword here, you can actually include a second value. So if not errors, if that ends up not working out, so if there are errors, then this second value will print out to the screen. So what we'll do is we'll make this an F string so that we can do some string interpolation. And we'll just say value wait triggered errors. And then so we'll use the join keyword. So this will make it so that if we have a list that we're iterating through, then it'll just print that as one big string with whatever is in here as kind of the separated, so comma separated. So that works. Oh, this should be lowercase weight as well to match. So now if we run the test again, okay, so they both pass. And just to show you that it fails, so if we type in some gobbledygook here, some mumbo jumbo, and we run, then it'll say the second one will fail because this is not in the list. So, okay, great. So that gives us a little more confidence that it's working. So we're only using weight now as the input, but there are lots of other ones. There's height, there's age, there's Fran, there's all those other inputs that you can use. So what can you do? Well, one thing that you can do is you can see about like duplicating this and just putting in height. That completely works, and then call this like test axis 2. And then if you run everything, then it's going to pass. But there's an easier way to do this. PyTest has actually thought about this feature before. It's called Parametrize. Yeah, I can't say it apparently. This word here. So as you can see, like what it's doing is it's saying these parameters. So test input matches the tuple that's given in this list here, and then expected is that's all these values here. And then what you're doing is they've set up a simple test function to just see if the input, if the evaluation of it, if it equals the expected output. So 3 plus 5 equals 8, so that'll pass. 2 plus 4 equals 6, that'll pass. 6 times 9 does not equal 42 though, so that's going to end up failing. So you see when they run the test here, they get an error that the entire thing doesn't pass because this one thing didn't pass. So that's what I'd like to do for this, is I'd like to kind of take advantage of that feature. So what I'm going to do is I made a list of the metrics up already. So I'm just going to include this up here. So that's going to be one big list. And then so the way that we're going to run this is pytest. Let's see if I can pull up the documentation again. So what you're setting here, these are actually being included in the evaluation here. So do you remember how I was talking about how the PyTest will look at the parameter list and see if one of the arguments that you specify matches the test fixture? Well, it does the same thing for Parametrize here. So we'll just copy this because this is long and I don't want to have to repeat it. Okay. So we're going to call this, we're going to call it value. That's how we're going to specify it in our function. And then the list is the second parameter to this. So we call the list just metrics like this. Okay. So then over here, we can just say value as one of the parameters. So then that, when it runs, will take on each value that's specified in the metrics here. So for set value, we'll say value. And then to make this more accurate, we can also include value in here. So if we run this now, you'll see it's running through everything for the x-axis here. So that's that's great. That's awesome. Because we have it in verbose mode, we're actually seeing everything that passes rather than by the default, which is just only what fails, which you may want, but I kind of like seeing everything that passes because I guess that just makes me feel better. Okay, so last up here, we have other inputs. We also have the y-axis. So what we're going to do is we'll just duplicate this function for that and change around a few things. So this has to be y-axis. The test will be y-axis. And I think that's it. So if we do pipenv run test now, all passing, awesome. Moving on to y-axis passing. And it fails for the last one. It says pull-ups is not in the list, but clearly it was. And it was passing for the x-axis. But that is because, so in the code here, we made it so that you can't specify the same thing for the x-axis and the y-axis. So at this point, when it's running everything in the y-axis, the x-axis is currently being set to pull-ups. So to get rid of that, we can just use some array slicing here. So array slicing, so this specifying the colon and then -1 at the end. So this will just remove the last item from the list. So now if we rerun it, great. Everything passes now. Cool. Now we have one more input. We also have a trend line here, which I think I just called this. Yeah, I just called the key trend line. Okay, great. So the key we're gonna put in for that. The rest should be fine, except so we don't want to use metrics anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new list called trendline functions. And I can either put it down here or I can define it up here. It doesn't matter. I prefer to define it up here. I just think it makes things like a little bit more organized. So put in trendline features. Save that. And then oh, we need to, we'll just say test trendline. And then if we run everything again, okay, great. Everything passes. Awesome. Alright, so I'm going to be looking at Apple event and just say, and one more thing. So pytest gives you the ability to specify markers so that we can run only certain tests without having to run the whole thing. This becomes useful for us because if we're running the entire test every time, it takes a little while to just start going through everything. So I'm going to quickly show you how we can take advantage of that. So we want to, our first step is we want to register a custom marker in pytest.ini. And we'll just call this, for lack of a better term, we'll just call this single right now. Okay, and then the way that we can use this in pytest is we can just put in another decorator. Say we only want to test the trend line feature. That's all that we're really interested in right now. We can say pytest.mark dot what do we call it? Single. like that. And then in our pip file here, we just want to do pytest. So -m will run only what's marked with what you have. So we'll say -m single. So now if we run pip env run test, you can see it's going to start only with the trend line, and it said 30 of them were deselected. So what we can do also, just to set us up for success here, because that's what we're all about, is we'll make another one called full test, and instead this will just run everything by default. So if we say pip env run full test now, you can see it goes through everything. And we have to sit here and watch everything pass, which is kind of a cool thing, I guess, but really time consuming if you're watching this over and over. So that is the last thing that I wanted to go over with unit testing for that one. So thank you guys for watching.